G'day Eagles fans, welcome back to True Eagle. Today I thought I would do a video sort of having a little look at where we're at as a team in terms of our progress. Have we improved as a side this year? Have we gone backwards? I mean, if you look at it superficially, it's pretty easy to make the case that we have gone backwards because we've won less games, but I've done a bit of a deep dive on some statistics. Yeah, I think that's the best way to look at how we're going at the moment because I don't think simply looking at the fact that we haven't won as many games as last year is, I think that's too superficial to assess the growth under McQualter. I think there's a lot of extenuating circumstances. I'm not going to say that I came into this video expecting to, conclude that we have improved, but there's some reassuring stuff that I've found and did a bit of a stats deep dive. I think if you consider the broader context as well, if you compare us to last year, I feel like the way this year is going is quite the inverse of last year. Last year we had a really exciting first 9 rounds. We had 3 wins in that time. We had exciting wins over Richmond, Fremantle, of course. How good was that? Then against Melbourne. And after the Melbourne game, I remember thinking, gee, I don't really know how to assess this Eagles group. That was followed by 12 weeks of listless performances. We had a couple of late wins, which were admittedly fairly good. Well, there was a good quarter against North Melbourne, and then we reverted back to a really poor finish against Carlton and Geelong. And I think, reflecting on those, and I think I thought those at the time, it felt like in the games that we won last year, we put in these amazing efforts. The senior players really provided the goods. Elliot Yeo, Jake Waterman, Jeremy McGovern, probably our top 3 players. And then throughout the rest of the year, I thought there was a lot of listless performances, some decent ones, but for the most part, there was just a huge gap between our best and our worst. And conversely, this year, it feels like kind of the opposite. I don't feel like we've had too many performances that were really bad this year. I mean, round 1 against Gold Coast was awful, but I think to some extent we came into that game with expectations. It was a really poor performance no matter what way you slice it, but I don't think we thought Gold Coast were any good. And, we also probably had inflated expectations because it was round 1. And subsequently since then, maybe the Carlton game earlier in the year, and then the one most recently, I had a bit of a dummy spit in the review because I wasn't happy with the way we played in that game. But even then, that was really only a quarter. So all in all, in some ways, we have grown in terms of how we're competitive, in terms of our brand. Last year, our brand was it was few and far between the performances where we could see that kind of style. And I think under McQualter, we're seeing it pretty regularly at the moment. It's not always, resulting in scores. The stats do back up that we have made a lot of progress. There's a lot more of an even performance. And certainly, part of the important context to this is those players I mentioned, Yeo, Waterman and McGovern, are all out of the team. Oscar Allen, he missed the first half of last year, admittedly. He's now out for the rest of the year. I'm not saying that's an excuse because we know he hasn't had a great year. But, some of our most experienced and high-profile players, they're either out of form or they're dropping like flies in terms of injury. So from that point of view, the fact that we are putting in more even performances, more team cohesion on show, I think that is a positive, even though it hasn't resulted in wins, and I'm honestly not really expecting 2 more wins for the rest of the season. Before we get into some of the ways we seem to be tracking relatively well, I mean, we know what we're bad at the moment, but it's good to find these silver linings at a time like this. But I sort of want to discuss the experimentation we've seen with McQualter. Fresh set of eyes on the list, obviously. It was probably at a time where we needed it. Similar to how when Woosha stood down, we probably needed a new fresh set of eyes on that list to take it to the next level. It's a vastly different situation now. But I think overall we have seen McQualter come in, and you may not agree with some of his moves, but for the most part, he has thrown the magnets around. So what have we got here? Well, first of all, he's been brave enough to drop Tim Kelly and Tom Cole at various points this year. Now, Kelly came back into the side, but I do think that's probably symptomatic of a bigger problem we have around our depth and our waffle performances. But, when Kelly came back in, he was also relegated to half forward, which is somewhat ballsy, I think, for McQualter. And, it seems to be better than it was when he was playing midfield minutes and still only getting 10 disposals or whatever. So from that point of view, at least there has been a proactive move by McQualter to get Kelly away from the part of the ground where he can expose us the most, to be honest. Brady Hoff has now become a full-time midfielder. I think he's the most attended midfielder over the last, 4 or 5 weeks, whenever he made that move. I think it was against Hawthorn. We've seen Marek move to defence. We've seen Tyrell Dewar spend some time there. We've seen Ryan get more time at stoppages. That's not particularly new, but it is something we've continued. And Tyler Brockman is spending more time as a midfielder at stoppages, which is probably where he's played his best footy so far. So again, more experimentation. Jack Hutchinson's role's been moved around a little bit. You could say that it hasn't had much success. We saw him against Geelong last year get 24 touches and 6 clearances. This year, he's not spending a lot of time actually at the ball drop. He's playing largely on a wing. And I don't know this for sure, but I kind of get the impression he's playing more of a defensive role. So he's getting some low disposal counts. I'm kind of comfortable with him in the team because I feel like athletically and in terms of his mentality, he's got something we don't have, really. He's got great two-way speed. He's a good tackler. And he's pretty versatile too. He can go forward and clunk a mark, and he can kick goals as well. So that's a wait and see. But again, we have seen some experimentation, and obviously McAlter rates him. We've seen Duggan move into the midfield and then out. So I suppose the pleasing thing is that we moved Duggan into the midfield out of necessity. McAlter tried it, and fair enough, he hasn't seen Duggan play as a midfielder before. He then moved him back out of the midfield, which I think is a fairly good move on balance. I still like Duggan as a player, but he is not playing well at the moment. And regardless, all of his best footy has been running off a half-back flank or potentially on a wing, but he's not a stoppage player. So in that sense, I'm pleased that McAlter's tried it. And then, save for against Carlton when Hoff was out, Duggan hasn't really played midfield since. We've seen plenty of exposure for Harley Reid and Elijah Hewitt outside of Hoff over the last month. I think over the course of the season, Harley and Hewitt are our most regular midfielders. So even though certainly not Hewitt, he's not getting more than about 50% time on ball in a given game. He's still getting as much as anyone else, so from that point of view, they're protecting him, and we're seeing some reasonable exposure there. He's not rotting away on a wing or a half-forward flank. He's at least getting some time on ball, and we've seen great growth from Hewitt. We've also got 7 debutants, which I thought there would be more than that, but let me know in the comments if I got this wrong. But Hamish Davis, Tom Gross, Bo Allen, Archer Reid, Tom McCarthy, Sandy Brock, and then this week, Job Shanahan against Collingwood, which I'm very excited to see. So that leaves us with only 4 players on the list who have not actually debuted. So again, we're just seeing some continued exposure to a young list. Some of those other guys are like Malachi Champion, Colin Livingston. I think Jacob Newton is actually one of those 4, and Luca Grego. I think over the last 10 weeks, we are the second youngest and distantly the least experienced team in the competition. I'm going to guess that from this point onward, depending on how quickly Matt Owies gets back into the team, I think we're going to stay the youngest and least experienced team in the competition. So this is valuable context as well for assessing us in comparison to last year. So if you do a superficial look at the last few seasons and assessing whether West Coast has improved, well, if you just look at percentage, we're actually not too far off last year's percentage despite having, 3 relatively comfortable wins last year. And this year we've had just the 1 win by 4 or 5 goals, I think, against St Kilda. And our percentage is only 3% behind. And like I said, I don't think those terrible losses have come, certainly not as regularly as last year. There's probably been a handful this year. Even in some of our bigger losses on paper. Against GWS, we had a really good quarter. Against Carlton, like I said, I wasn't pleased with the way we played, but we still got that margin back to 34 points, and that's maybe something we wouldn't have done in previous years, if I'm being completely fair there. The Adelaide game, I thought we were a chance to upset them at half-time in that game. Then we fell away, and I'll tolerate that because for half a game, we played well. So again, these are things we weren't doing over the last 3 years, really. For context, it's 65% now. It was 68% last year, our percentage. The year before that, 2023, our percentage was 53%, and the year before that was 59.8%. So again, we are a little bit more competitive, despite the fact we're not actually registering 4 points. Our percentage and how we're staying in games has meaningfully improved from 2023 when we last won the Wooden Spoon. Here's some stats that are some silver linings that I've found through some light research this afternoon. In the last 10 games, we have spent more time in our forward half than the following teams: North Melbourne and Richmond, Essendon, St Kilda, Port Adelaide and GWS, who currently sit in the top 8. Now, I know that GWS and Port Adelaide have their own issues, but they're relatively strong teams on paper, certainly GWS in my opinion. So to be tracking ahead of those teams in those stats despite the results that we've seen, which has been 1 win in the last 10, that's pretty good going. When you think about our glaring weaknesses over the last few years, time in forward half, it's just not something, I'm just so not used to seeing the ball in our forward half. We are seeing that brand relatively consistently now. We're just not quite winning, we're not getting close to winning games, really. Our average inside 50 count has gone up. That has been something that's plagued us for a number of years, and that's including last year where we had some good performances. We won 5 games. We have gone +3 in inside 50s per game. So that is something. We're getting territory, we're getting intercepts in our front half, we're keeping the ball in our front half, we're getting the ball inside 50. And we all know that we're terrible at converting those opportunities at the moment. So on average, we actually only concede 5 more inside 50s than we get per game. And I would say, on balance, that is still a huge improvement considering how young this team is. The contested ball stat doesn't make for good reading. That is also part of the brand that we're espousing, or McQualter's talking about contested ball quite a lot. We were only -9 last year. We are now -16.6. In both cases, we were 18th. The only sort of excuse I'll give us here is, Elliot Yo's out, McGovern's out. Some of these players probably would rack up some contested ball. I'd imagine intercept possession probably counts as contested ball. Overall, we're much younger than we were last year, so this stat's not tracking well, but perhaps we can give us a little bit of an excuse for it. There's a lot of small bodies in this team. I had a look at the disposal efficiency stat because I've assumed we must be terrible for this. We're actually not too bad relative to our ladder position, but there's a stat on, I think it's Wheelo, the website I look at, and it's called ball retention rating, and I don't really know exactly what goes into that, but we are distantly last for that. I mentioned intercept possessions in general, particularly in the front half is where we've been good this year. We're actually ranked higher than 6 other teams for intercept possessions, and I believe that's over the course of the entire year, which is good considering I think we didn't really see much of a brand in the first month of the season. Believe it or not, we are ranked higher than Sydney, Fremantle and Richmond for marks inside 50. I thought we would have ranked really lowly for that, considering Oscar Allen's form, considering Jake Waterman has not played much at all this year, it is now out for the year. It's not a bad stat, and also our ball use inside 50 is terrible, so we're at least getting some opportunities in that sense. So as a club, or specifically McQualter, who is a mouthpiece for the club, we talk a lot about defensive efforts and pressure, etc. So there's some stats we actually ranked top 4 in over the course of the year. So top 4 for defensive one-on-ones loss percentage. So the percentage of defensive one-on-ones that we have, we are top 4 in the competition for making sure that ends in our favour. Again, we're talking about a very young backline here. Jinby's just past 50 games. Hoff has moved out of the backline. We've got Liam Baker back there. But in terms of defensive one-on-ones, you got to think Sandy Brock, Harry Edwards. To be ranked top 4 in that stat is pretty outstanding going. And that's per loss percentage. So it's irrelevant how much more opportunity they're getting. Does that make sense? So the more time the ball is in our back half is actually irrelevant. It's per percentage. We're top 4 in the league for pressure acts. I don't really know what the pressure act stat really means. Does it mean if you're just sort of half-assed chasing someone behind them and fail to tackle, does that count? It probably does, but overall, I've said this previously, we do okay when the pressure rating score comes up. I can't see that on this website, but generally our pressure rating has been pretty consistent. And we're 3rd for 1%ers. Again, it's a little bit unclear exactly what that is, but I think I'd still rather rank highly in that stat than otherwise. Oh, and if you didn't know that our rucks have been a problem this year, funnily enough, we're not last for hitouts to advantage, St Kilda are, but I think we're last for the percentage of hitouts that we win that turn out to be to our advantage. So not only are we not winning hitouts, we have the worst conversion rate for winning the hitout to getting it to our own players. So yeah, that just confirms what we already knew. So look, that's a bit of a snapshot of where we are, some ways we're tracking all right, some areas of improvement that we kind of already knew. Overall, I'm sort of comfortable to say that we probably have improved as a team, considering the context of getting much younger, and the contributions from these younger guys are more even than they were previously. And our senior players haven't really performed that well this year, and we're still actually not too far off where we were last year. We certainly haven't had any big wins. It was one really good performance. We beat St Kilda. There's been some other honourable losses, but we haven't, smashed Fremantle in the way that we did. We just don't have the cattle for that. But I got some question marks, things that I'm just intrigued to see, what's realistic to fix over the course of the next couple of months as this season goes on. I'm curious what will happen with Ryan Marrick now that Tom McCarthy has come into the side. Now, I'm recording this while the teams might be out very, very soon, so maybe we see Marrick dropped, but that's a bit of a question mark for me. Do we need Ryan Marrick playing that unaccountable defensive role if we've got Tom McCarthy, who's arguably done it better in his first game? What is Dewey's best position? Maybe we don't need to find out what that is long-term right now, but he has moved around a little bit and, obviously has had some really good games this year. Is Hoff a midfielder? We should have a fairly clear answer on that. I would like to see Hoff winning a few more clearances. Great player, does a lot of stuff well, but even games where he was winning like 25 as a midfielder, he wasn't winning clearances. So, that's fine. Maybe he's predominantly outside midfielder. We feed the ball to him because he is a decent ball user and he's got some, leg speed to create overlap, etc. But I would like to see some more development in terms of him actually winning his own footy. We know he's not soft. It's a craft thing. It's a football smarts thing. Can always offer something. I think he's 1 week away on the injury list, so it remains to be seen whether he comes back into the side. But obviously, I think the best outcome for us is he becomes a good player and contributes. That's still a question mark. Then we need some answers on Tim Kelly, Jaden Hunt, and Jamie Cripps. Now, again, correct me if I'm wrong. I know that there was reported that West Coast was set to offer Kelly a 2-year deal, and that probably means it's locked and loaded. But I don't know if they've actually signed on the dotted line yet. Either way, he's still got something to prove to me, and I'm going to guess that a lot of you agree. Jamie Cripps, I'm campaigning for him to ideally stay on the list, but with the position we're in with list spots, naturally still needs to prove something between now and the end of the year to ensure that we know that he's not over the hill. I don't think he is. And Jaden Hunt, again, out of contract at the wrong time, 30 years old, probably had some average performances recently. He might even get dropped this week. Again, I'm recording this as the teams are about to be announced. We'd love to see improvement in our rock combination. Again, that's something we've experimented with a little bit. We've previously just gone Flynn or Williams, if I'm not mistaken, and now we're seeing both of them play, and arguably we are probably better with both of them playing, to be honest. I think Bailey's been all right as a forward, and Flynn's had his moments, but we're still not winning hit-outs, and certainly not to advantage, as we know. So I definitely think that's room for improvement. I believe that Darcy Cameron might sign with Collingwood, or at least not leave. So we might just have to find a solution internally, at least between now and the end of the season. That's definitely the case. We're going to have a look at a very young forward line in our AFL side with Allen and Waterman both unavailable. We've got Bailey Williams in there, not super young obviously, but new to the forward line. Archer Reed, Jack Williams. We've seen Jobe Shanahan debut. Now, again, you know more than I do at this current point in time. I don't know if he's playing back or forward, but I think he might be playing as a defender. Either way, there's some really young, tall talent that we're going to continue to expose over the course of the year. But I'm excited to see that. We'd love to see players like Noah Long, Clay Hall, in particular, guys who've had a taste, or in Noah Long's case, a pretty good taste now of AFL footy. We'd like to see them establish permanent spots. Clay Hall does, the right thing in the waffle. He seems to win plenty of the footy, wins clearance. I don't know if they think that his game is rounded out well enough. I'm not really sure exactly what the knock is. But it'd be a great result, obviously, for him to take a midfield spot, because it's up for grabs. Between him and Tom Gross, it's got to be one of them soon. With Hoff, Hewitt, Harley, pretty much is the only 3 permanent midfielders we have in this team. There's a spot open for one of those guys. And we'd love to see some waffle competitiveness. On that as well, it'd be great to see Rhett Bazzo push for an AFL recall. It sounds like he has played all right lately, so it'd be nice to see him re-earn a spot. Obviously, with Gov going down, there's a little bit less depth than there otherwise would. Harvey Johnson's another one I really liked last year. It'd be great to see him earn a recall as well at some point this year. I don't think he's played a single game this year. And it'd be great, obviously, if Campbell Chesser can earn that spot. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about giving these guys games, but if we're getting these performances in the waffle to put pressure from below, then obviously that's a net positive for us. Had a cheeky little look at players who passed 50 games in 2025. So, we know about Jinby. That happened already. I think that was against St Kilda. Harry Edwards just hit 50 games as well. The reason I say this is because that's kind of the threshold where, well, some people say that's where players start to really become, well, closer to the player that they're eventually going to become, right? In terms of fulfilling that potential. So we're seeing a big leap from Jinby. We've seen a bit of a leap from Harry Edwards, I would say, this year. Brockman's at 47 games. He's improved this year. Flynn is at 47 games. He's probably improved, certainly on what we've seen previously to some extent this year, but both you'd think can improve further. Ryan Marrick's at 43. I think we just need to find a position for Ryan Marrick. Would he be better as a forward? I don't know. We'll put that in another video, but I would like to see potentially McCarthy down back and maybe Marrick with Allen and Waterman out. Maybe he gets another gig as a forward because he is talented. And surprisingly, Jack Williams, he's played 38 games now. He won't hit 50 this year, but that's a lot more than I realised. I would have thought like 21. Yeah, fun fact. So finally, the outlook for the rest of the year. I just really want at least one more win. A single win season would be just embarrassing. And despite everything I've said here, I mean, it wouldn't really tell the story. I think we were worse in 23 and certainly in 22, albeit we had an injury crisis. This year, we haven't had a crisis, but we're overexposed and in a lot of ways look better than we did over the last couple. Certainly not better than our best last year, but a lot better than our worst. We haven't raised the ceiling, but we've raised the floor of what we produce quite substantially at this point. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a little bit worried as a young group have we had our purple patch? Like, I've been fairly satisfied with what we've seen for the most part over the last 10 weeks. I'm worried it's going to get worse. But in terms of wins that could potentially happen, we do have Richmond at Optus. That's probably the only one you'd say that is the game we could potentially win. There's some away games. We've got Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval. They're so much better than us, but they are shaky enough where we could get them. We got GWS at Optus as well. We beat them in 2023. And they were probably better back then than they are now, so maybe that counts. Melbourne at Marvel, look, they look pretty good at the moment. Poor start to the year, but they've improved, so they should be too good for us. And Sydney at Optus never goes well, but maybe I'm just sort of thinking, over the last couple of years, we've played Sydney once, and we were pretty good against them at Gather Round. Have we overcome that hoodoo where we get slaughtered by them all the time? Touch wood. I don't know. I've picked 4 games. I really don't expect us to win, but those would be the potential upsets, unless we roll Collingwood at Marvel this weekend. How good would that be? Anyway, guys, this is a bit of a brain dump, this video. Just a bit of a stats deep dive on where we're at. Sort of confirmed a few suspicions I had that we're not tracking as badly as the ladder suggests when you consider the context of we just don't have the good players. The ones we have are all out, and we don't have many to begin with, but there are some green shoots, and I am, as always, looking forward to seeing us play against Collingwood at Marvel on Saturday night. Let me know in the comments what you thought about what I've said in this video, guys. How are you feeling about the Eagles generally? And I'll see you in the next one. Up the Eagles.